Okay, good morning. I think all of us in our careers have all had this situation where somebody says something to us that really kind of lands with us and stays with us for a long period of time. And I think there can be different statements, different comments that are made to us. And certainly one of the ones that's always stuck with me is that many years ago, when I first became a sales manager, and and we can all recall going from being the salesperson to a sales manager, first managerial role, and you just think you have made it. You think that you have just cracked it. You think that you can walk on water, you can do no wrong. And after a very initial phase of that, which was rocky, being honest, and that could be the subject for another talk, but at the end of the first year, we actually had achieved target and exceeded target. And I just thought that I could do absolutely no wrong. And I was so thrilled, and I was going into my manager, the sales director, full of vim and vigour and delight and ecstasy, and thought, waiting for all the plaudits to be bestowed upon me for what I was doing. And to be a little bit, kind of hurt about the fact that his attitude was, well, that was done last year. And it's over and done with, and now we're into this year. And his comment was, and he said, and by the way, we're looking for 30% more next year, which was not something I had particularly expected. And when I recovered somewhat, or at least it looked as if I had recovered, I think, I said, well, okay, that's fine, but I need more resources. And it was then that he said something to me that stuck with me, and it still to this day stuck with me. He said, why? He said, are you getting the most out of the team that you currently have? Which is a bit of an unfair question, because the answer is you can't say yes to that, because there's always something more that you can get. And I said, well, no. And he said, well, then why should I give you more resources when you're not getting the most out of the resources that you've already been given? And there's kind of no answer to that. And I must say, it stuck with me as in terms of what we actually need to do as managers and leaders. And the challenge for us as managers and leaders in the business is to actually get the most out of the team that we have, which hence the kind of the slide that I've got is that there's always more under the bonnet when you actually lift it. And it might be a bit surprising at times what's under that bonnet, but there is always more under the bonnet. And that really is the kind of what I want to talk about today, which is actually to understand what it is we need to do and how to go about getting more from the team that we have. And I want to try and make this, in terms of that, you actually walk away today with a couple of things that you can do immediately to help you to actually get more from the team that you have got. So there'll be a little bit of work that I'll ask you to do and a little bit of sharing that I'll ask you to do just to try and make it interesting for you. But it is important that I want you to walk away this morning with a couple of things that you can actually go back, either if you're the leader of a team or if you're a member of a team, that you can go back and actually do something with and you can have a conversation. Because the big question is, and will continue to be, are you getting the most out of your team? If you actually look at it, what is the percentage of your team's full potential is being exploited today? And that's a really, really simple question, and it's not an easy question to answer. It's interesting as well that very often when I use this with leaders of team CEOs, is that one of the things you can do is that you can also look at, if you're looking at your team, plot the individual members of the team. So you can do it for the team as a whole, you can do it for individual members of the team. So if you're looking at it and saying, well, okay, I've got a team of 7, where would I plot the people on that particular range? Because that's the job that we have as leaders. And I would say if you're doing it with your team, and I said we'll give you a handout in a second just to talk about it, but if you're doing it as a team, that actually is the question that you're looking at. And that's the question the high-performing teams are always looking at. Are we getting the most out of the team that we have got? What is it that we actually need to do? And the exercise that you can do is that if you're doing it with the team, say, okay, well, what's the potential today are we exploiting? And I'm just picking again May 2019. What could it be in May 2019? I'm not being kind of silly about it and saying it's 100%, because you can't get 100%, right? But what is it that you could get? And then to understand and have that conversation with your team and get everyone to plot where they see the team today, and where they could see it in 12 months' time or 6 months' time, whatever the period of time is. But don't make it too long. You know, when I started working, you did 10-year plans. Well, there's a joke. It was a joke back then, right? But it was even more of a joke today. So, you know, do it for your team if it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. What could it be? To make it real and to understand what it takes to actually move it from one to another. And, you know, to give you an example of a team that I worked with quite recently, where they saw themselves, I think it was around 68%. So that was what they felt when each one of them had cited what they felt was the potential being exploited. And then they said what they wanted to be 12 months on was 87%. And then the conversation comes, well, what's going to make the difference between those two? What are the things that we need to do as a team to understand that? So Brady, could you hand out maybe just to each of the teams, because it's just a copy of those slides, and just take a moment to reflect for yourselves, where would you put the team, your team, if you're a manager of a team or if you're a member of a team, where would you plot where you are right now? And be realistic about it. And this is not scientific, but your gut is good enough for this, right? And have a look and say, where would you say your team is right now, today, and where would you like it to be in 12 months' time? So just intuitively, just as a gut, where would you see yourself? Where would you circle where you would be today, and where would you like to be in May 2019? Anyone throw out a percentage of where you see your team today?
65%.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Huh? 70, okay, all right. The interesting thing to look at, if you're looking at it, if you say the full potential of your team is, say, 90%, right? So if you say it's 60, what's your 68?
65.
65. I thought, gosh, it would be great if somebody gave me 68. It'd be the same. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You always get some willing partner.
It was 70.
It was 70, okay, but knock a little bit off. Yeah, yeah. It's a Thursday. Yeah. But what you're looking at, you can look upon that there's 22% loss or opportunity, whichever way you want to look at it. Now that's an awful lot. If you actually figure out that in a team, and look at the cost of a team, right? And then you work out 22%, 25%. That's a lot of money, right? There's a lot of money and there's a lot of resources, a lot of time that can be, utilized there to actually get more. And it's not about getting the number right, by the way, right? Because it's actually about the conversation that you want to have. It's the conversation that needs to take place to understand what's going to shift you from one to the other. To give you a little bit of background on that, if you're looking at the zone of peak performance, and that's really where everyone's going to get, where you're actually optimizing the potential, it's anywhere up around kind of the 80 to 100%. If you're in that zone, you're in peak performance. Your team is in peak performance, right? Because the rationale is that, you're going to get 90%, 80 to 90% of the time, right? So because you can't get, if you're at 100% of the time, you got burnout. So it's not going to work. So if you're in that zone, then that's where you're looking at peak performance. So that's where you're trying to get your team to. And all of the research done with high performance, peak performance teams, they're talking about how can we actually get the team into that zone of peak performance. If it gives you any consolation, we've done this work with hundreds of teams in different industries and different countries. So, right across, and they're all senior teams. And the average is 61%. That would be the average, which is interesting, right? So when you're talking about it, you actually do there's always a lot more under the bonnet for the team that you have got. And we have a terrible tendency, and it's kind of human nature as well, but we have a terrible tendency to kind of think we need new this, we need more that, we need extra this, we need whatever, right? And we're always looking outside. And my challenge to anybody in a leadership team, and as somebody who was in the corporate world and ran leadership teams, is the job is to actually optimize the potential of what you've got already. Because if I go back to that great comment by my sales director, why should I give you more resources to waste than I've already given you? And that's kind of a really hard question to answer, and it's hard to come back from that. But why is this important? Why are we talking about this? Because when we're looking at it, the things that matter when you're actually talking about the zone of peak performance, these are all the elements that are up there on the screen that matter. We've got a strong sense of purpose. We've got grit, and grit is hugely important. We've got resilience. We've got stamina. We've got, purpose. All of these things that are so hugely important. And if you're not operating in that high performance, peak performance level, then some of these are missing. And some of these have been diluted. And the more they are diluted, the less effective and the lower the performance the team is going to deliver. So these are all hugely important, and they're not just thrown up there at random, right? They are all hugely important elements that we need to make sure that people have got the right focus on and have got the right amount of. And it is important that we actually do that, because even if we take things like psychological safety, I'll come on and talk a little bit more about that part of it, the kind of the softer side. But I mean, that psychological safety is hugely important in a team. I don't know if any of you have come across Patrick Lencioni. Anybody come across his work? I'm a big fan of his. He's an American writer, and he's written, he's certainly well worth reading. But probably one of the best known books that he wrote was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it has dysfunctions because made up of people who weren't just naturally dysfunctional. But one of the really powerful things that he does in that book and in that research is that he does a direct correlation. He says trust is at the base of any team. That is the foundation of any team. And there's another talk in that, but it is hugely important. And he has done a direct correlation between the level of trust in a team and the actual performance in terms of the actual numbers that a team will deliver. Right, so it's not just a nice to have. It's not just, well, it'd be kind of nice if we had it, but at the end of the day, if we all do our stuff, then it doesn't really matter, right? That's not true. If you have, and trust is, impacts on the psychological safety, because I can be open, I can be honest, I can look for help, I can ask for, tell people when I got a problem, all of that sort of stuff, and that's hugely important. But all of these are massively important if you want to have a high performance team. So you've really got to figure out both the hard stuff and the soft stuff, and we'll talk more about that later. And when you talk about it, there's so much written about the whole thing about potential, about winning and losing. And they're the topics of conversation in high performance teams. Are we getting the most out of it? Do we understand what winning means? Are we all on the same page when it comes to winning? Have we got the same clarity about what winning looks like? And I will touch on that, and also about losing. And they certainly, in terms of performance, they are the big topics that have been talked about. And there are 2 books that I mentioned there. I highly recommend them to anybody. Grit is by Professor Angela Duckworth, which is, to my mind, just a phenomenal book. Really, really well worth reading. Very practical, very good, huge amount of research done on it. And the other one, Carol Dweck, about mindset. Because we do know that mindset plays an enormous part of that. So if you want recommendations of things to read, I would certainly recommend that you do that. We have worked for quite a number of time, and I've worked with an organization in developing a program we call, it was about around the pit stop, right? And the reason that it's actually around pit stop is that the metaphor that's used is Formula One. And why is Formula One kind of the metaphor for us? And the reason it is that if you're looking at high performance teams, then Formula One really does encapsulate everything that you talk about. And the interesting thing in Formula One is that the teams spend as much money on developing the team as they do on the car. right? Because if you think about what they do, it's not just about the car. They actually spend as much money on developing the team. And the analogy that we use is about the pit stop, and we use that for very specific reasons. One is that the pit stop happens and the race is still going on. So the race doesn't stop for the pit stop to happen. So, that's hugely important. The second reason that we use it is that if you think about the pit stop, which I just still marvel at how they can do what they do in the time that they do it in. But the only reason that they can do it in that time is that they have got incredible alignment on what it is they're actually trying to do. It's a great metaphor, right? Everybody knows their role. Everybody's got different roles, but everybody knows what their role is. Everybody knows what they need to do. Everybody knows when they need to do it. And they've all got to be perfectly aligned on doing it. And they've got to work closely together. So it does work as a perfect metaphor for that. And that's why we actually do use that, because it does, when you're bringing it to the business, if you want to get your team together, it is the equivalent of a pit stop, because the business is still going on. You can't stop the business to actually take a bit of time. But it's actually to get the team to think about how they're operating as a team. So just taking that metaphor is that why we look at it that way is that because you do have the whole thing encapsulates. You've got the structure of a team, you've got the culture of a team, and you've got the business that you're operating in. So it does work extremely well. Also, when you look at it, that we're not just looking upon it as the driver, which is the leader of the team and the manager, but we're also looking at it in terms of the team or the crew that you have got. Because when you're looking at that, that's actually what is going to drive the results. So the performance is about a combination of the driver, the car, and the team. And that's really what I want us to focus in on today, and I want to focus in on some part of it. I'm not going to talk about the business very much, but I do want to talk about the team and focus in on that. We always come back and do the other parts again if you so wish. But when you're looking at that, you've got to break it down into, you've got the design of the team. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But you also have got the dynamics of the team. And that is massively important that we actually understand exactly what we mean by that and actually breaking that down. Now, we use data when we're actually working with teams, so we actually gather a lot of data. So we do the data beforehand and we have the data at the end. But forget about that for the moment. That's not quite relevant for us today. But when you're looking at the design of the team, the design is actually looking at, the structure. Have we got the right people in the right jobs, doing the right work, in the right way, with the right resources, getting the right rewards, and producing the right results? And if you think about each element of that can be a very big question. And we will give you a handout in a few minutes just on this, so that you've got a copy of that slide. So it really does, that is the structure. That's kind of, and any of those, and I'm sure all of you are reflecting as you go through the different points and that you're thinking about different elements of that. But it's always always the question, have we got the right people? Have we got the right mix of people in the right roles? And in my experience in organizations and the organizations that I've worked in and organizations I work with now, that actually does come up, that we don't have everybody in the right roles. We may have the right people in the room, but they're not all doing the right work. But the other element is that, are we actually doing the right work? Is everybody doing the right work? And when we talk about the right work, is that, are we fully aligned on achieving the ultimate goal? Are we clear about what it is when we actually put it all together? What does it make up in terms of the objectives? And are we working in the right way? Very interesting. I was at a presentation quite recently by, the organization Great Places to Work. Great Places to Work, isn't it? Yeah. No, it's not. It's not. Is it? No, it's not part of Retail Excellence. No, it's not. No, they are. They're not. Sure, they're not. No, they're not. They're quite separate. But very interesting. The John Ryan, who's the CEO of it here, was giving a talk, and I just thought it was a very good talk. But I thought it was very interesting. He was talking about that the database that they have, I think it's somewhere in the region of about 40,000 people. I may have that number slightly out, but it was in that sort of range. But he said the three main reasons why people are dissatisfied with their job and with their organization. Number one was management behavior. I thought it was interesting, it was management behavior, right? How they actually behave as management, right? Second was communication. Not a big surprise, right? I've worked with hundreds of organizations, and I have yet to go into an organization and they say, our communication, we have it down to a fine art, right? So that's never ever happened. But the third one was performance management. But interesting enough, actually, the angle on the performance management was that they didn't see that the underperformers were being managed. Right? Which I thought was a really interesting element to it. And we have the whole story where, okay, we've Jimmy in the organization, and we know he's not great, but Jesus, he's been around since, Moses was a child, and the clients love him and all that sort of stuff. And I know he doesn't do a tap of work, but listen, we all know Jimmy, right? But Mary is over here doing a ton of work and is doing all the stuff that Jimmy doesn't do, and nobody really recognizes it. And Mary's kind of there feeling slightly pissed off about the fact that, what's happening? No one does anything about Jimmy. So it's actually about the lack of management, of performance management. I just thought that was really interesting as the top three. But it does come back, when you talk about behaviors, it does come back. I mean, are we working the right way? Are we actually working together the right way? And I must say that it is one of the things that I've seen in organizations that, in leadership teams, that the critical element to it is the behavior of the management team, how they work together and how they're be seen to work together. Because if it's not working, if they're not working together well as a team, firstly, everybody in the organization knows it, despite what the team would like to think. Everybody in the organization knows it. And you just got dysfunctionality cascading down through the organization. And I've had conversations with CEOs where I said, I really want us to focus in on the middle management because I don't like the way they behave. And my question always is, well, hang on a second. The first place you got to look is in the mirror because it's coming from you, guy. And that's where you got to start. And it is critically important, and people don't pay as much attention to it as they probably should. But that's around the design of it. Then the other part is around the dynamic in terms of what is the culture. And we got things like, is there a sense of urgency around the team? Or is it just that one or two people have a sense of urgency and the others are kind of, well, it'll be fine. Is there a sense of urgency around the team? Is there a certain amount of tension and cohesion? And you do need a certain amount of tension. There's a little bit like, you do need a certain amount of stress. Stress is good for you up to a certain level, and beyond that, it's not very good for you, but up to a certain level, it is good for you. So is there the same level of trust? Is there the right, discipline around it? When we say things that we're going to do things, do we actually do them when we say we're going to do them? Or do we allow drift? And I've seen, and I've worked in teams where there's kind of an unspoken agreement that, I won't challenge you, Fergus, at the meeting because, then you won't challenge me. Right? Now, we've never had this conversation, but we kind of understand it, that's how it works. And therefore, everything then just becomes slippage because we don't challenge. I'll have it for you Tuesday, and Tuesday, oh, sorry, I was a bit busy. Jesus, did you not know you were going to be busy? So there is that kind of acceptance of drift. So there isn't that sort of discipline around it. Focus on winning. The winning, if you talk about high performance teams, every single member of that team will be clear what winning means to that team. Absolutely crystal clear. They will not have different versions of it. They won't have their own version of what winning means. They'll have the version of what the team means and what it actually looks like. So that's about the dynamic, and it is important because, when we're talking about, you're talking about the hard stuff, which is about the structure and the design, and you're talking about the soft stuff, which is around the culture, the people, behaviors, ambitions, etc., and all of that. And the thing about it is that we're all much more comfortable talking about the hard stuff, because we kind of, you can put it on a spreadsheet, you can put it on, you can put it down on paper, you can put it actually, it's easy, you can get your head around it. But we don't spend as much time talking about the soft stuff. And, and the research done, the McKinsey thing is quoted there that, it's about 53-47. So it's equally important It's every bit as important. And if we're not taking cognizance of what it actually means to, what's happening in terms of dynamic, we are missing a huge element in terms of driving the performance of the team. And really what you're talking about is trying to get kind of the whole thing, putting it together in the business. And I'm not going to focus in on the business here. Bernie, could you hand out the other handouts? And I want you just to kind of spend some time, and I won't be asking any questions of anybody, but if you were looking at the design, and if we were doing this in a real workshop, you would get red, amber and green stickers, right? So the green it's in good shape. Green it's in good shape. There might be some low-hanging fruit, but it's actually in good shape, right? Amber could do with a bit of a fine-tune. We could do with doing something about it. And red we really should do something about this, right? And if you look at that, if you just take it just in your own team, and I said, I'm not asking anyone to share this with anybody or anything, but just in your own team, if you were looking at the design, where would you put your red, amber and green in terms of the design? In terms of design, so let's just look at design first of all. Where would you put your own red, amber, green? Where would you think, okay, well that's in pretty good shape. Maybe we've got the right people, but maybe we haven't got the road clarified. Maybe there's a bit of definition in terms of clarity around roles or objectives, something like that. So that might be an amber. Or, it might be the right work. Are we doing the right work? That's fine. But, in actual fact, we're not working well together as a team. So that might be a red. So really just in your own, just kind of figure out where would you put, if you were doing this for your own team, where would you put your red, amber and green for the design? And again, don't overthink it. Your first instinct will actually be pretty accurate. And it's really interesting. We do a lot of data analysis in advance, so we actually get people to complete questionnaires on about 250 elements of the team, which kind of subsets of what I'm talking about here. And so people are actually completing this, and it's amazing. Your gut reaction tends to be right? So where would you look if you're looking at it from a design? And I would say go back to your teams and have this conversation with them and say, okay, let's have a look, let's play this. Where would we put our red, amber and green for the design? And again, if you look at the dynamic, because this is all about the psychology and the behavior. And it's interesting when you think about it from a leadership perspective. To be an effective leader, you've got to have followers. And why do people follow you? They don't follow you because of what you say. They follow you because of what you stand for and how consistent you are in terms of what you say and what you do. So it's not about the title. It's never going to be about the title. So you want to be a real leader. It's about that integrity of the consistency between what you say and what you do. And again, do the same thing. If you're looking at the dynamic of it, where would you put your red, amber and green on the dynamic? Would you say, okay, well, we need to have maybe a better sense of urgency, or we need to have better communication? Here's communication again. We need to have better communication as a team. Or we need to have, there's an issue about trust. And in truth, in most teams that I would work with, and again, it makes no difference between the country, the industry, the organization, teams that are not working effectively together, certainly one of the issues is going to be trust. And that creates its own dysfunctionality. So where would you put your red, amber, green? Do we know what winning means? Are we clear about what winning means? Have we all got the same view of it? I did some work with an organization a while ago, and they said to me, oh, listen, we've done the vision and the strategy piece. We've done that. We got another consultant, and we paid a lot of money, thanks a lot, to that other consultant. And now we'd like you to come in, but I just want you to work on the implementation piece, and how we actually do it, right? Which is grand. And I thought, okay, fine. They sent me what they'd done, and it looked great, and absolutely it was fine. And the first morning I was working with the team, I kind of got a sense, I thought, I'm not sure that they're quite as aligned on this as they might be. But I didn't want to say anything. And initially. And so I waited until the coffee break. And when they came back in after the coffee break, I gave them each kind of a large post-it. And I said, could each of you just write down what are the key elements of the vision and the strategy? And that was a conversation killer, right? Because you could see people going, oh, Jesus, right? And it was kind of, what will we write? And there was a long time before people started to write. But eventually people wrote stuff down. And we put it up on the wall, and it was frightening, right? Now, I'm not being critical of the work that was done or anything else, right? The reason that they'd forgotten it is that it wasn't connected to what they were doing day in, day out. It was an intellectual exercise. It was almost like an academic exercise that was done. And it was a bit like, oh yeah, we need a vision and strategy, so we'll go away for a day and we'll knock that out, and then we can put it away and it's grand, we just get back on with the business, right? It wasn't connected. And so therefore it meant nothing. So there was nothing wrong with the piece of work that was done, the quality of the work was fine, but it wasn't connected to what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's really what you've actually got to do, so that there wasn't that alignment. So don't ever assume that there is alignment just because you've actually shared something once. Right? There's a lot more work to be done on it. But if you're looking at that and saying, okay, where would you put your red, amber, and green? And then having looked at both of those, it's always about choices when we actually come to do things, because there's always a load of things that you can do, but you've got to pick some, you've got to make some choices around what are the things that are going to have the biggest impact. So when you've looked at your red, ambers, and greens, then you've got to come back and say, okay, well, what are the maybe over the next 90 days or 180 days, but certainly more than that, over the next 90 days to 180 days, what are the things we're going to focus in on that's going to have the biggest impact on the team and the performance of the team? So again, it's about bringing it down. And this is not high-tech, complex. This is pretty simple, basic approach to actually getting something done. So it is what we call, what are the winning moves that you've decided to generate? And again, you can do this with your team. You can go back and you can actually do this today if you have the mind to do it. But it really is kind of looking at it in terms of what's the winning move. Very simply, it's kind of saying, okay, what is the current situation? Say, for example, okay, we recognize we have an issue with trust in the in this team. So that might be it. Or we have, we don't have clarity on objectives, or we don't have alignment on objectives, whatever it might be, right? Or we're not working efficiently together. So whatever it might be, just state exactly as it is. And then, what the situation that you want to be in 3 months or 6 months' time. So describe exactly what it is that you want it to be in 3 or 6 months' time, and then describe what you and the team can do, and then also perhaps if there's something that you actually need the organization to do. Okay? So very, very simple in terms of actually determining what it is. But it's all about choices. It's all about determining what's going to make the biggest impact, because there's loads of stuff that you can deal with, and there will always be loads of stuff that you can deal with. But it's actually about doing the things that are going to have the biggest impact on the team right now. And it's interesting, somebody was saying to me, pretty useless information. Somebody said to me recently that it wasn't until, I think it was the 1930s, that there was the plural of the word priority. And if you think about it, it actually makes sense. How can there be a plural of one? But that doesn't suit us. We have to have loads of priorities, right? But actually, when you've got loads of priorities, you've no priorities, right? Because everything is important, and everything is urgent, and everything is, right? And, and we laugh at it. But actually, that's how many businesses function, right? It never ceases to amaze me. And I love doing this with teams. I did it actually only last week with the team. We're working together. I said, okay, as a team, what are the top 3 priorities for the business? Which, ergo, because the senior management team was for them. What are the top 3 priorities? Right? And this is an owner-owned business. Right? And it took us 2 hours to agree what were the top 3. Now, and in a sense, why was I surprised? Or why should I be surprised? Because everyone looks at it from their perspective. Everyone looks at it through their prism. And what you've got to make sure you're doing is that if you're not clear on what the organizational top 3 priorities are, then how can you actually cascade it down and make sure that they all flow up and flow down, and that there is consistency. And when you have misalignment in organizations, and very often people interpret misalignment is that, oh, you know, Josephine has just been difficult. Actually, very often it's that if there isn't clarity about what the direction we're going in, I'm going to decide the direction I'm going in. Now, if it happens to be in the same direction as the company, that's more luck than anything else. But we end up with this kind of people pointing in different directions because there isn't clarity. And it's our job as leaders to ensure that we're giving that clarity. So that's really the important thing from our perspective, is that we're giving that absolute crystal clarity to what the objectives and the priorities are in the business. So that's an exercise that you can easily do. You can use that, you know, have the conversation about potential, have the conversation about the design and the dynamic, where your red, amber, green is, and then picking from that, what are you actually going to take out and what are you going to focus in on over the next period of time to actually do something with. Another exercise to do, which is really powerful, is that, you know, in a race, whether it's Formula 1 or any other race, the finishing line is terribly clear. You know, there's no ambiguity where the finishing line is, right? It's there, it's absolutely clear to everybody. I would argue that in many businesses, the finishing line isn't as clear. What does it look like? People say, well, we hit our targets. Okay, a measure, not the only measure, but it's a measure, right? But again, you go back to what the purpose is, and that's another conversation. But it's really important that as your team, you are very clear about what the finishing line means for this team. And I've seen, you know, people do this exercise and they really use it powerfully. Because what we do is that we actually give, and you can do this yourselves, we give a black card for what the team is, and we give a white card for what it means to you personally. Because, you know, for the individuals in your team, there's got to be a personal win in there too. There has to be a personal win in for them too. And I've seen the most extraordinary things when we actually did one here in this place, and where we actually laid out on the ground of what the winning line looked like for a senior team. And it is fascinating to see what comes up. I mean, the business stuff can be, you know, pretty predictable in some ways, but not necessarily in the early part. But when you get to the later on to defining it, then it can be. But the personal stuff can be really, really important. And I've seen things in it like pick my kids up from school, or, you know, collect my kids from school. Could be go to Disneyland. Could be move house. And that's really important, because I've always argued when I'm doing one-to-one coaching is that, you know, it's all of you that turns up for work. It's not just part of you that turns up for work. It's all of you that turns up for work. So there's got to be a professional and a personal win in it for you. And it's actually, if I don't understand what the personal win is for you, well, how can I manage you, lead you, coach you, develop you if I don't understand that? So there's got to be, and of course, in order to be able to have that conversation, there's got to be a high level of trust. So we come back to trust again. But it's really important to understand that the team has, and I've seen teams, there's one person I'm thinking of that use this really well, and at their monthly management meeting, he actually takes out what was the finishing line they created and say, okay, how are we doing against that? Both personally and collectively, how are we doing against that winning line? Are we getting closer? And it's really powerful because it's that combination of the professional and the personal, and it is really, really important to do that. We're running against a bit of time. The other one to talk about is, and it's coming back to it, I'm not going to go into much detail, is that if you think about in terms of alignment, if you think about the Formula 1 car, the nose cone has got to be pointing, it sounds obvious, the same way as the wheels are going. Yeah, if you don't, you've got to have a problem. You're going to have a crash, right? But in organizations, you've got to have clarity around the purpose. What is the purpose of the organization? And there's an interesting conversation to have. What is the actual purpose of it, of the organization? What are the priorities? Go back to, again, to what I'm talking about here. What are the priorities? And then what are the results that we're looking to achieve? And making sure that you're keeping those front and center. And purpose is not just the academic or, you know, kind of intellectual statement that we make. I always have a slight, and I'm probably going to insult somebody here in the room, I always have a slight issue when I go into an organisation and I see their mission statement up in the reception. It always gives me a slight little niggle in my stomach, right? Why are you putting it there, right? You know, and I always get, and I've tested a few times, say, okay, well, I said to somebody, what does that mean? What? What are you talking about, right? What does that mean? Oh, I don't know, right? And that's such a wasted opportunity, because we all want to walk behind some banner. We all want to belong to something. That's just a part of our DNA, is to belong to something that's greater than ourselves. And the organisation's got to be clear about what that purpose is. Because yes, it is about return to shareholders, yes, it is about all of that, but it's more than that. It's above that. And if you want really to engage people, you've got to engage people both intellectually and emotionally. So it's, you know, it's heart and soul stuff. And you've really got to make sure that you're connecting back to the purpose. You know, we understand what are the results that we're looking to get, and it's not just, I'm not talking about just the numbers. You know, there are other results that we're looking for in an organisation, and then what are the priorities? And it's really important for you to have the conversation with your team so that everybody is crystal clear about what the priorities are for that team, and that you're lining everybody up behind that. One of the things that I find is that one of the challenges is that how do I put it together? And how do I actually, you know, okay, we get together, we've had a great conversation, it's been a great morning or it's been a great day or whatever it is, but then I get back to the office and we just kind of, you know. And it's the classic, and let's face it, we've all done it. We've all gone on courses and, you know, you're there, and it was just, geez, I'm going to change the world after this, right? And I've got the folder, and I've got the binder, and I've got everything, and I go out into the car park, and I put it in the boot of the car, and 3 months later I go, oh, Jesus, that's where it is, right? We've all done it, right? It's also the you know, where you know, your boss goes on a time management course or something like that, right? Or how to organise meetings, and you come back and he's changing everything. Think, listen, we'll just humour him or her, right? He or she'll get over it another while, and we'll be back to normal, right? And there isn't that kind of stickability that you need to have in terms, and there's no rocket science to any of this. But I think the first and foremost is that when you're actually doing this sort of work, when you're doing the conversation around potential, when you're doing the conversation around what's red, amber and green, and what are the priorities, and what are the things we're going to focus on, is not to actually make it as these are separate to the day job. These are the day job. If you're a manager and a leader, these are the day job. These are the things that you need to be doing. They're not, oh, well, yeah, but I'll do the day job, and when I have a bit of time, I'll actually focus on that. No, no, no. That's the wrong way to set out in this. These are the day job. And I have a pet hate in terms of meetings, one-to-one meetings. Well, A, if they don't happen, I have a real problem with it. But secondly, that they're a bit kind of rambly and kind of, you know, you end up talking about what somebody's pet subject is, but you don't actually talk about a lot of other stuff. A discipline that I have utilised in the past, which is no, yeah, and I'm not pretending to have designed it either, but what I've kind of just taken it from different people, is that when it comes to having a 20-minute weekly meeting, now I'm not saying this is the only thing to do, but I'm saying this isn't a bad place to start or to have it as a discipline. And if I'm having a meeting with somebody who is reporting to me, the first 5 minutes, I want them to talk about what they completed last week. Now, I'm using the word completed very intentionally, right? Because I'm not asking them what did they do last week. Because then I'd say, well, we had a meeting about this. We had a discussion about that. We had a review about that. We had a project meeting about that. I said, no. I don't know what, you know, all that, right? I want to know, what did you complete? What did you finish? Or what were the results? I want the output, right? Not the process. Because, very often when you actually talk about, even when you get into talk about winning moves, and people say, well, what's the first, what would success look like? Well, we'll have a meeting. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. What was completed the last week? And this brings a big discipline to everybody, both sides of this conversation. What was completed last week? 5 minutes for that. 5 minutes then is what you're going to complete the following week. And it's not, I'm going to meet Mary Jo, and I'm going to meet so-and-so, so-and-so, and I'm going to phone, No. What are you actually going to complete? What are the results that you're going to get? Because the whole time you want people to get into, and this creates a discipline, it's not just for the meeting, But it creates a discipline and a mindset it's about output. It's about what's being delivered. Not about what's being thought about or talked about or met about. It's actually what's being delivered. And then I would, as if I was the manager, that I would say I would spend the next 5 minutes asking questions about both those subjects, right? So give or take 5 minutes on that. But that for the first 5 or 10 minutes, I just shut up and I listen, right? Because you've got to put, and the reason you're doing this, there's kind of multiple reasons why you're doing this. One is that for this meeting to be efficient, but also you actually want to get in, this is how we run the business. This is how we do things around here. It's about focus on the important, it's about focus on delivery. 5 minutes you ask questions, and then 5 minutes, so what are the things that may be blocking the way, what support you might need, whatever it might be, right? But what do you need from me, what do you need from the organisation, what are the things that might get in the way of you doing that, what are the issues that you need and the support that you actually need to have. Now, I'm not saying that this replaces kind of all other one-to-one meetings, but I'm just saying if you want to make sure that you're driving through on, what the winning moves or whatever else in the business, you've got to have consistent, regular meetings with people in order to maintain momentum. And it is actually it's not just checking up on it, it's actually demonstrating that you're interested, and you're also demonstrating that it's important to you. The biggest mistake I see many managers and leaders is that they cancel their one-to-ones with their own people. That is a huge negative. I had a row with somebody recently, a leader who I was actually running a morning workshop with their team, and the leader kept leaving the room because I've got to make calls, and I've got a meeting, whatever it might be, right? I had a real go with them. I said, no, hold on a second. You think about it. They were justifying it to me. I said, no, hold on a second. What's the message that you're giving to your team? The message you're giving to your team is that you're really important, right? And actually, you're so important, but they're not important. And you need to recognize that that's the message that you're giving to the team. And they were really annoyed with me for saying it to them. But I really believe it. And I think the one thing as a manager and a leader in an organization, your one-to-ones with your team are absolutely sacrosanct. And the organizations that do that tend to be the organizations that have high-performing teams. Because it shows that you're interested. You're not there just checking up on them. This is not about, a school report. This is actually about checking in. What are we doing? Are we on track? Are we off track? What support do you need? Do you need anything from me? And I would say that kind of once a month, add another 5 minutes to that just to talk about their personal and professional development. That it's on the agenda. Now, I'm not saying that replaces every other meeting or it's outside of your performance management system or anything like that. If you want to get me on performance management systems, that's a separate discussion, and we could have a long conversation about that. But I'm just saying that if you want to have a high-performance team, you need to be in communication with those people on a consistent basis, on a regular basis, and checking in on what they're doing. Now, you can change.
Recommendations on how you do these 20-minute meetings, like when you team this desperate in Cork, Kerry, wherever.
Do it virtually.
Do by Skype.
Yeah.
Do by
Yeah, I mean, all of the one-to-one coaching that I do virtually, because I've got clients in different parts of the world, and it's much more efficient, it's much more flexible, and it's an interesting dynamic. Actually, I find actually that if I do meet somebody face to face, you get into the hi, how are you, the weather and the coffee and the match, whatever it might be. When you're doing it on virtually, you don't tend to do that. You actually tend to get down much more straight to it. So I find it actually much more efficient in that sense. But that's the way I would do it. And I've done work in organizations where they would have people all over the world. Somebody would have individuals on different, and they would do this by Skype or GoToMeeting or Zoom or whatever it might be. But it is important that you're actually keeping their own personal and professional growth on the agenda as well. I don't think it's something that you need to address every week, but I'd say once a month. Why are you doing that? You're doing that to really come back to where we started. Because at the end of the day, the people that you have in your team are the resources that you are given to deliver the results that you're expected to deliver. And it's about you really focusing on how can I optimize it. And this work will never be done. That's the bad news. The good news is that it's great fun if you're doing it right. right? And everybody is in it, and everybody is enjoying it, and everybody's enjoying the journey. And everybody actually, you form a team. And there is nothing more powerful than a high performance, focused, aligned, clear, team that's clear on their priorities and they're moving forward. I hope today has been valuable to you. I hope it's been something that you can take back and you can do in your own organizations. I've given you some stuff. There's a book which is around the pit stop. It's written by John O'Gorman and Ray Collis that I've got. Bernie will give you on the way out. And if anybody wants to have a chat with me about any element of this or anything, I'm very happy to have that. But listen, thank you for the opportunity. Fiona, thank you for the invitation. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.